I love Tigers. The Tiger 800 for its time was very decent. The Tiger 900, especially after restylings, are great. The 900 GT is a super balanced bike in detail. The Tiger 660 also well tuned as a small sport tourer. The old Tiger 1200 is heavy but very cool handling engine suspension. Its problems were more on the reliability and difficulty in maintenance. The new Tiger 1200 has a different engine, redesigned shaft drive and swing arm, got rid of critical reliability issues, plus a noticeable weight reduction and a choice of 20 or 30 liter fuel tanks. It would seem that the title of best bike in the class is already in the pocket. I was really looking forward to this bike, but both versions left mixed feelings. Let's get to the good stuff first. The Tiger 1200 is easy to describe as an intellectual aristocrat. You immediately feel the quality in the finish, material, the buttons. The seat, traditionally for Triumphs, is one of the most comfortable, ergonomic, and perfectly balanced. All steps levers are light, squeezed by force of thought, mirrors with excellent view, top and perfectly predictable brakes, and finally a beautiful, elegant TFT display. But the main things are the engine and gearbox. Traditionally a smooth engine, again very comfortable, soft quick shifters, which does not try to be instantaneous, it has a task to smooth out the jerks and the shifts. And the shifting is time stretched but very cozy. Unlike most bikes, on the Tigers I use the quick shifters even when shifting from first to second. The engine is smooth and doesn't shake at low revs. Even let's say at 2000 RPM, the engine accelerates smoothly. This is what I call an elastic engine, to ride smoothly over the widest possible range at any flap position. For example, in third gear you can go 30 kilometers an hour steadily or 130. Tiger 1200 always pulls confidently. So the choice of the optimal gear here is subjective. Because of the smoothness, it would be possible to leave only one mode in throttle response. The Tiger 1200 has no jerks, you can always clearly control the traction. So one sports mode works amazingly well on asphalt or off-road. All this applied to the old Tiger 1200, but the new one has changed the firing order. Following the example of the Tiger 900, the Tiger 1200 used to have the firings at regular intervals, now it doesn't. The meaning is clear, the firings are placed closer to each other. The torque from the work of one piston slightly overlaps with the second and you get a strong impulse, which is close to two-cylinder engines while maintaining a short stroke response. But it is necessary only really for off-road. The Tiger 1200, no doubt about it, even rally. And what disadvantages do we get? Firstly, at very low revs, the engine has a higher chance of stalling. By pushing the operating cycles closer, a long idle period is created in which there may not be enough torque to spin. While the old Tiger 1200 could consistently ride at ultra low revs, right at idle, the new Tiger 1200, which is still much better than 90% of bikes, but not like the older Tiger. Right in some specific low-speed situations, like a tight U-turn, you can stall. I've never stalled once, but it is possible. I've read about such situations, and I've had similar situations on the Tiger 900. The 2024 version of the Tiger 1200 has weighted some parts of the engine to increase inertia. On the one hand, it slows down the engine response a little bit, but on the other hand, it reduces the chance of stalling. They've created a problem for themselves to solve. The second problem of this arrangement is vibration. When a typical 3-cylinder engine crankshaft spins on its axis, it is very balanced. It still needs balancers for the pistons, but it's solvable. So for the example of the old Tiger 800 with regular firings is the softest engine in the class in my opinion. And in general, civilian 3-cylinder engines with regular firings and balancers tend to be very comfortable. They can have slight vibrations, but not at the level where it's any reason not to buy. The Triumph T-plane crankshaft apparently is not the subject for perfect balancing. Both the Tiger 900 and the new Tiger 1200 have practically the same peculiarity. There is virtually no vibration up to 5,500 RPM. And then there is a strong increase in vibration beyond that. If at 6,000 RPM it is tolerable, then at 7,000 RPM it is quite unpleasant. And purely because of the vibrations on the highway, the motorcycle is perceived as not luxury. In the case of the Tiger 850 Sport, you can close your eyes to the vibrations because the bike is inexpensive. But the Tiger 1200 is an expensive luxury motorcycle. The buyer has the right to demand more. On the Tiger 900, this problem was overcome in the restyling by installing handlebars through dampeners. It really works well, although some people still complain. On the Tiger 1200, the engine itself is bigger, the pistons and crankshafts are heavier, and there are more vibrations at higher revs, and the dampers don't work as effectively. The most significant change to the 2024 Tiger 1200 is the reduction in vibration. They've played around with the engine balancing and now claim to have reduced vibrations depending on the axle by 5, 43, and 89%. To summarize the effect, the vibrations have been reduced by almost half. They created the problem themselves and solved it on both the Tiger 900 and the 1200. The Tiger 1200 has a lot more torque from the bottom on twisty roads, and the 2022 version, it was nice. The problem was only at highway speeds. The 2024 version fixed that problem. The slight itch remains, but overall it's now a quite comfortable engine even for people who don't like vibration. I'd say in terms of vibration, it's the same level as the 1300 GS and much better than it was on the 1250 GS. Actually, to summarize what I think of the Tiger 1200 GT, it's better than the 1250 GS, but worse than the 1300 GS. I don't claim that to be true, but that's the gradation for me. I had high hopes for the Tiger 1200 though. I myself would love to only praise bikes, but that's not how it works. I see the flaws, and I can't do anything about it. Welcome to the dark side of the review. I'll start with a scolding of the rally version. Until I rode it, in theory it seemed pretty good. Yes, the 21-inch wheel is questionable for a bike with a weight starting at 250 kilograms, but the presence of a semi-active suspension was encouraging. With 21-inch wheels and a semi-active suspension before there was the Africa Twin Adventure Sports, on the Tiger 1200 Rally, the fork is thicker and the travel is a bit shorter. So I was hoping for a good balance. Can't say that though, and even the 9 suspension tuning modes don't help. I've always ridden in the sportiest mode because even on gravel roads it's still soft. I can't really imagine a situation where I would need a softer mode. The bad thing about that is the 9th hardest setting is still too soft, meaning the whole range is set up too soft. The Tiger 1200 brakes are crisp with an instant response, just a little touch on the rally, and the wheel dives hard. So every corner is passed with a very long braking before the turn to reduce the dive and maintain controllability. Moreover, it is noticeable that the geometry of the rally itself is good. It is comfortable to turn back and forth at low speeds. There is no too tight steering damper. The problem is purely with suspension tuning. It's a similar problem to the Africa Twin. Only on Tiger, it is 1.5 times more power, and the bike is noticeably heavier. It is assumed that most of the Tiger lives on asphalt. And in the mountains, on twisty roads, it is not fun enough with that suspension. I understand that Triumph were keen to grab a slice of Africa Twin sales, only the Rally is not a competitor to the Africa Twin. The Africa Twin has both a clear concept and unique advantages. First, a reputation as a reliable motorcycle that is relatively easy to maintain with the widest range of service networks in the world, with an engine that is most indifferent to the fuel quality among its classmates. Triumph enters the segment with a reputation damaged by the previous Tiger 1200 in terms of reliability, very difficult maintenance, focused on official services, which are very few outside of Europe, and an engine with a compression ratio of 13.2 to 1. Secondly, the Africa Twin has an engine designed for low fuel consumption. Triumph also declares consumption of 5.1 liters per 100 kilometers. Only these figures on a large, short-stroke, 3-cylinder engine are very difficult to achieve. I had wet roads during the GT test, and during the rally test, I rode more carefully and slower than usual. On the GT, I had an average of 6.7 liters per 100 kilometers for the whole period. Most of the time I was riding in the mountains. The total mileage of the highways was not much. On the rally, I rode like a snail after rain with such soft suspension, and I measured only in the mountains at 6 liters per 100 kilometers. The Africa Twin Adventure Sports is a really good option to go somewhere in Africa or Mongolia with all the attendant factors. I have traveled all of Pakistan and Iran and crossed the deserts with the Himalayas and all of India up and down. I know what I'm talking about. I would not choose a Tiger 1200 for such trips under any circumstances. And Triumph doesn't even try to help you choose, because even the simplest rally with a small tank is heavier than the Africa Twin Adventure Sports with a large tank and noticeably higher seat. The Tiger 1200 Rally is an excessively tall bike, perceptibly taller than the Africa Twin. I'm not even comparing it to the 2024 version. It's noticeable, especially when the top box on it's at the level from the normal person's head. The bike does have auto lowering, which doesn't work too badly, but don't rely on it too much. The physical meaning of the auto lowering is that the bike temporarily changes the preload to a minimum when the seat is reduced, and only returns to the correct position when it's above speeds of 82 kilometers an hour. The irony is that for lightweight, short people who just have about the biggest problems with the height of the bike, where the automatic preload is already in a weak position, the auto lowering will make very little difference in height. Secondly, the 1300 GS, as its main competitor, has a better implementation of this mode because the low-speed auto-lowering can be made to always work for the right modes. Triumph's implication is that the next time you start the bike, the rider may get a little taller and no longer need that auto-lowering, so the feature needs to be enabled every time you slow down. I don't really understand why almost everyone is so bad at customizing this feature, even though there are 2 hours of work by an average programmer and everything will be perfect. Getting back to the height, it's not so much the seat height there, but the obscenely wide seat. Comfortable? Sure, but it's uncomfortable to reach the ground with your feet, even with being tall. Even GT, which is already with more or less regular height, still the motorcycle feels higher just because of the width of the seat. Now, returning back to the suspension, the bike is obviously purely European. And who in Europe needs such a suspension? There are simply no roads in Europe where such a suspension will be needed. And to ride such a monster with elements of enduro where you need a long travel suspension and wheels of 21 and 18 inches, you need to be at least enduro champion. When you watch another Tiger commercial, keep in mind that in their commercials, first of all, a 2-time Dakar winner rides, and secondly, they paid him money to ride a Tiger. And there's no versatility. Motorcycles like the Tenere, the Touareg can be justified because in a limited budget, you can really choose a universal bike, which will lose to specialized ones. But in general, it is able to perform different tasks. And the Tiger 1200 Rally is a very expensive luxury bike. You can buy a Versys 1100, a Tiger 900 GT, Tracer 9, Tiger 800 Sport, etc. The list goes on, for that exact price, all of which are a million times better on twisty roads. And I can't say that the Versys is vastly inferior in comfort or dynamics. And there will either be money left over or a little extra to pay for a KTM 690 or a Tenere that you can go serious off-roading on, including traveling. The KTM and the Tenere will always be on off-road tires, so there won't be the eternal problem of finding a mythical universal tire that will give 150 horsepower somewhere to use and ride with the sand. If you just want a poncy, off-road oriented adventure bike, there are tons and tons of other stuff out there. From the 1290 SAR, the Desert X Rally, you get the picture. The shaft drive on the Rally version is a questionable plus. Triumph has redesigned the swing arm though, plus they're not afraid to use solid clamps to attach to the rubber seals, and the rear rubbers don't accidentally get pulled off of their grooves. In any case, the shaft drive is worse for off-roading from the increased unsprung weight. In short, you have to be both very opinionated and very fond of Triumph to choose the Rally. Now, let's move on to the GT. This is not a bad and much more balanced motorcycle, but there are a number of questions to it too. Firstly, the very existence of the Rally version, GT version, has inherited some problems. On the old Tiger 1200, there was an option to opt out of the XC version, but it's pretty much the same thing, but with 19 and 17-inch spoke wheels. For heavy adventure motorcycles, 19 to 17-inch spoke wheels are the optimal format. Because the suspensions in the class are expensive and omnivorous, these bikes are comfortable going fast on gravelly, rocky roads. Alloy wheels at this weight's still a tangible risk of bent wheels. All competitors, without exception, have the option of 19 and 17-inch spoke wheels. Even the Multistrada V4 with its sporty flair, but Triumph can't. Either alloy wheels or put up with the soft rally suspension. Secondly, the GT has a narrow 18-inch wheel at the rear. I realized they wanted to unify the shaft drive with the swing arm on both versions, but it made more sense to put a 17-inch wheel on the Rally. There are plenty of tires of any kind, including off-road tires. I, for one, like to go on road trips on sport touring tires. Racing down twisty roads is a pleasure, and it seems like a 150 horsepower bike on alloy wheels should be suitable for such use. I went through catalogs of brands for interest. No one produces top-scoring touring tires in the Tiger's size. You will be satisfied only with a narrow Universal Adventurers rubber. The model is called Gran Turismo, but the tires of the Gran Turismo class do not fit. Not a trouble, but for a luxury motorcycle, you want maximum emotions, not just... Okay. I almost forgot to tell you about the suspensions of the GT. When I took the GT for a test, I immediately put the suspension in sports mode and remembered about the existence of the suspensions in an hour and a half. The ideal suspension is one that doesn't remind you of itself. It holds any corner and imperceptibly swallows any joints, drops on hatches, etc. In concept, it's a skyhook with comfort prioritized. It is difficult to compare directly with ground hook suspensions. It's a matter of taste, but from skyhook, it is the best realization on adventure bikes, in my opinion. On the Tiger 1200 GT, the sports mode is great on twisty roads, and the comfort mode handles rocky gravel nicely. The suspension is the perfect all-rounder, both soft and controllable. It is similar to the style of the Tiger 900 GT Pro, only even cooler. Except that the 900 GT has a chicly tuned chassis with a sharp geometry, so the bike is amazing on twisty roads for its class. And the 1200 GT is lazy on twisty roads. I will even say that the key drawback for this bike, for me personally, is I like sharper bikes. The Tiger 900 GT has an 130mm trail, a good crossover value. About the same range as a Multistrada V4, 1250 GS, or an old Tiger 1200. Nice, sharp steering. Only bikes with a very sporty bias where the trail is less than 100mm are cooler. The Tiger 1200 Rally has a 112mm trail, which is also not bad for a big adventure bike. The base 1300 GS has it, the Africa Twin has it until 2024, etc. And the new 1200 GT has a 120mm trail and quite the long wheelbase. This is already a category of lazy bikes, which are more for fast highways. On Spanish twisty roads or in the Alps with such bikes, it always feels oversized, which eats up a significant part of the buzz. The logic I can understand. A 150 horsepower bike with high windscreen, a sharp geometry will be prone to wobbling at high speeds around 200 kilometers an hour. And stretching the geometry is always the most logical solution. There is a more complicated variant to work around aerodynamics, and then you get the Multistrada V4, which is more powerful, it does not wobble, it handles well. Yes, the Tiger 1200 is also quite stable at speed, plus the Tiger 1200 has a floating top box, so even with it, the bike rides confidently. But alas, a little too lazy in control, which I personally do not like. I'm just sharing my opinion for this part, not persuading you also that this is fundamentally for you. For example, in Eastern Europe, there are less twisty roads. Not such a fundamental point. In Spain, where almost all the country roads are twisty, I would like to get high on them. It's a different story. Other disadvantages are not so fundamental for me personally. We can criticize the windscreen, which works for only an average height, both the GT and on the Rally. More specifically, it feels like the windscreen was designed for someone with a specific first and last name. The windshield itself is much wider than on the Tiger 900 and it works differently. On the Tiger 900, the narrow screen sort of breaks up the flow and there's no directional wind on you. You can ride up to highway speeds with goggles on and visor open. I am tall, and with the visor open, even at 30 kilometers an hour, it blows into my eyes. And with open visor and goggles on, the wind gets under the goggles and pulls the helmet even at 80 kilometers an hour. On the Tiger 1200, the wind flow is driven over the helmet. But with a tall height, the flow blows clearly and not even in the height of the position of the screen. Plus, despite the additional deflectors, at speed it blows into my arms and my shoulders. But it is trifles because the wind protection of the legs are excellent, ergonomics are comfortable. It is not too difficult to change the windscreen and get the royal comfort I desire, and for average height people, I'm sure the stock windshield is excellent. And it should be noted that the Tiger 1200 lags behind in terms of stuffing. It still doesn't have active cruise control, although all competitors do. Radar in Explorer versions with 30-liter tanks was immediately useless. It was only blind spot monitoring, which on the Tiger 1200 with its beautifully shaped mirrors is not the most necessary function. There are already spy photos of the updated Tiger 1200 with radar in front, but I don't think this version will hit the shelves before next year. There is a chance that as early as next generation, Triumph will fix all the details about the model that I don't like. In addition to active cruise control, the main competitor has an automatic transmission. I think that's important for the target audience of the 1300 GS and Tiger are aiming for. Plus, there are plenty of bikes with automatic transmissions to choose from this year. To summarize, the Tiger 1200 GT is overall not a bad bike with a ton of pluses. Definitely not terrible, but it didn't hit the heartstrings. For people with enough 108 horsepower, I'd recommend the Tiger 900 GT, more comparable in comfort and many more times in versatility. It is lighter, lower, handles great, it is much cheaper and easier to maintain. And if you want the emotions of a powerful bike, the Multistrada V4 awaits. It is more dynamic, controllable, and definitely not inferior in comfort. It is more expensive, of course, but in the difference of 15 to 20% in luxury segment is not terrible. And the 1300 GS hasn't gone anywhere. It is more obediently controlled, feels lighter, top-tier technologies, and good liquidity.